Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is all set to virtually inaugurate the model of proposed memorial of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose in Andaman and Nicobar Islands on 23rd of January to commemorate the freedom fighters' 126th birth anniversary. Now, over the years, BJP and Congress have been sparring over Netaji's legacy. I am joined by Netaji's daughter, Anita Bose from Germany. Hello, Ms. Bose. Thank you for joining me on India Today.
Jai Hind to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Ms. Bose, I would like to start by asking you, very recently you have said the BJP and the RSS are using Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose's name just to further their own interest. Do you believe so?
I have heard that the RSS would like to celebrate Netaji's birthday. And if the RSS is willing to embrace Netaji's values and his ideas, I'm certainly happy. I'm very happy that members of all parties across the spectrum remember Netaji, respect him and love him. But I certainly would not agree that Netaji shared the ideology of what I believe is RSS ideology.
You seriously think whatever the BJP and the Prime Minister have been doing over the past many years is just to make sure that they take the legacy of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose? There is a fight which has been taking place over the past many years between Congress and BJP about the ideology of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. Both the parties claim Netaji was theirs.
I'm not quite sure I heard your question correctly, but if I answered the wrong thing, please point it out to me. Netaji certainly was a socialist leader. He considered himself part of the Congress left wing, and he believed in the uplifting of the downtrodden, of all underprivileged people, as well, of course, as those who are well off. But he certainly, first and foremost, believed in the fact that members of all religions and of all castes should live peacefully together with mutual respect.
Do you think India now is doing more than ever to showcase Netaji to the world?
I certainly think that the present government is doing a lot to pay homage and to pay their respects to Netaji in many different ways. And I certainly welcome this. And I also have to admit that some of the previous governments have not gone out of their way to that extent.
So you believe what is being done now should have been done many years ago?
In a way, yes, but I would also like to point out that it is not only for Netaji's memory and his paying respect to him, but more even to the members of the Indian National Army, of many of whom have passed away since then. There are very few who are still alive, and I think it must have been very painful for them who still lived, that for many years their contribution to India's struggle for independence was not recognized. After all, it took decades after independence till they were even recognized as freedom fighters, and that was, of course, a question of personal regard, but also of certain benefits to which freedom fighters were privy, and the Indian Indian National Army veterans were excluded for quite a number of years.
Do you think...
In fact, it was Nehru-Gandhi who eventually recognized their contribution.
Do you think Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose's and Congress's ideology was similar?
In a number of ways, yes. Congress as well as Netaji believed that India should be a secular state as far as the political aspects are concerned, even though he personally was a very religious man. he certainly believed that the state should not be a state of a theocracy, so to say.
Now, the Congress party and the Gandhi family, they have faced charges like spying on Netaji. Do you think the Gandhi family overshadowed Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's contribution to the country?
We have to remember that at one stage, Netaji and Pandit Nehru were friends. After all, Netaji was present when Mrs. Gandhi passed away in Europe, and he helped with the arrangements for her death rituals here, and considered Jawaharlal Nehru a brother, so to say. On the other hand, he was very disappointed when Jawaharlal Nehru did not support him when he tried to become re-elected as Congress president. The older Gandhi, or rather Nehru family, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and Indira Gandhi, knew him personally, and even though their governments did not necessarily make great efforts to recognize the INA's and Netaji's contribution, sort of keeping to the narrative that it was only the civil disobedience movement that brought about independence, which of course from later documents we know this was not true. The, so to say, younger Nehru-Gandhi generation, I think, was not so much aware of Netaji's contribution and not so much willing to recognize his contribution.
What do you think the Modi government should do to align more with Netaji's ideas and the country that he wanted India to be?
I think they should pay attention to what Netaji called for and believed in. And of course, one of the most important things is the peaceful cooperation and living together of members of different religions and different castes. And another aspect, of course, which to some extent over the decades has improved throughout the world, they should also recognize the role of women and as equal and equally capable in political and in everyday life, not only in family life. Netaji, after all, believed in the fact that if you educate a woman, you educate a family. If you educate a man, you educate only one person. And I think these are two important aspects. Of course, there are a number of other aspects which maybe have also changed over the decades because the economic and political circumstances in the 1930s, 1940s, when Netaji was active politically, are different from what they are now. Of course, today India has to pay attention to its role as a global player, its relationship to other countries, environmental concerns and many other things. But I think there are many things that Netaji already addressed, which any government in India is well advised to pay attention to.
Anita, as a daughter, are there many questions in your mind? Do you believe the Indian government needs to do more to find out what really happened to India's biggest leader? Do you have questions in your mind?
I believe that Netaji died on the 18th of August 1945. And I think there is ample documentation available now. The last things becoming available after the declassification of documents by the Modi government. And I think it would be time to accept this generally and not follow up all sorts of fantastic stories regarding his supposed reappearance, etc. And I think it is time that his remains should be brought back to India, because it was his dearest wish to see his country independent. And there certainly was a tragedy involved that he could not set foot on the soil of free India, so at least his remains should be returned to his motherland.
Anita, however, the declassified Taiwan Police Department documents, they have found no evidence that Netaji died in that plane crash in Taiwan. Do you think the probe has been gathering dust for 60 years? Or you think it's all done and dusted, one needs to move on now?
I'm afraid I couldn't hear you very well, but from what I think you said is there are 11 investigations which were carried out to find out what happened to Netaji, because he passed away at the end of the Second World War in the Eastern Theater of War. We have to keep in mind Japan capitulated on the 15th of August 1945. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were bombed with nuclear bombs on the 6th and on the 9th of August. So these were traumatic days for Japan. And it is clear that at the time, not everything was documented as carefully as it might have been desirable, but you can rest assured that at least the British government at the time was very, very interested in whether he passed away or whether he might reappear sometime and cause them additional trouble. So they had investigations carried out also by the Americans that came to the conclusion that in fact he died. And for example, they also released his brother Subhas Chandra Bose only from prison or from internment after they were sure that Netaji no longer lived. So there was ample of evidence, but it was not available at the time because many of these documents were classified. Over the years, they became declassified, and even the 3 Indian investigations carried out, headed by Shahnawaz Khan, by Khosla, and by Justice Mukherjee, documented many of the aspects that did happen. Unfortunately, the Mukherjee report, which was the only one that came to a different conclusion, contains many mistakes, and I cannot explain how they came about, but I think we can be rest assured that as far as documentation is concerned, it is clear that Netaji died in August 1945, and all the other fantastic stories, the most fantastic, of course, that he is still alive, were just speculations and wishful thinking.
Now, Anita, you recently had said the ideology of RSS, now it inspires the current government, does not coincide with the ideology of Netaji. What do you think are those points which are very different?
Of course, we are talking about different time frames too. The RSS is still operating today and, of course, addresses problems of today. Netaji passed away, as I mentioned, a long time ago, and some of the issues that were at the forefront were different at the time. But I think the most important one we can say is the attitude towards members of different religions, and of course the question to what extent religion should be part of the political arena. And Netaji definitely was of the opinion that the state should be secular. And I mean, you have to consider India has always had a large number of members of different religions. Of course, the most numerous and important minority was the Muslim population, and even today India is the country with the 3rd largest Muslim population in the world. And so I think a peaceful and respectful coexistence of Hindus, Muslims and other members of other religions should certainly be an issue for a modern country.
Anita, Netaji had a faith in armed struggle. He believed that's the way through which India will get the freedom. But these ideas were very far removed from what Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, they were trying to do. They were saying we don't want any kind of violence. So do you think there too there was a clash?
I think with regard to the question of using military, and if you would like to call it violent measures to gain independence, there was a difference between Gandhi and Nehru, because Gandhi was rather uncompromising in his attempt to gain independence by non-violent means. And if you look at his work and his actions, sometimes he became a bit inconsistent in some of the things he called for, because he was unwilling to turn to violent means. Of course, that had a number of reasons, I'm sure. And Netaji, from that point of view, was always of the opinion that violent or military means should not be excluded. And if we look back at the time of the 1930s, we had already had war in 1937 and thereabouts, and of course Britain became involved a bit later in 1939. Netaji saw it as a possibility to gain the support of the enemies of his enemy, and thereby gain independence. And in the 1940s, when the Congress leadership sort of acquiesced and said, okay, let us support the British against the fascist powers, provided they will promise us independence after the end of the World War. Nothing happened. In fact, the Congress leadership landed in jail and couldn't do anything. And at the time, it certainly looked as if without military means, the struggle for independence would certainly be impaired rather than strengthened.
Thank you, Anita Bose, for joining me on this very special edition. Thank you for joining me on India Today.
Jai Hind, and thank you.
And with that, it's a wrap on this bulletin. For more news and updates, you can log on to indiatoday.in. You can also download the app. This is me, Aishwarya Paliwal, signing off.